I slammed my car door, the sound echoing across my ranch, and stood frozen, staring at my own front porch in utter disbelief. A pink scooter lay toppled on the deck, a pair of muddy men's boots sat by the door, and a folded stroller leaned against the rail like someone had already moved in. I'd just driven 14 grueling hours from Arizona, cutting my trip short, only to find my front door wide open, the savory aroma of roast chicken wafting out like a cruel mockery of home. A dog, not my dog, barked inside. Laughter rang out. Dishes clinked. I inched closer, heart pounding, and peeked through the window. There she was, Karen, the HOA's reigning menace, lounging at my dining table, wearing my favorite flannel shirt like she'd claimed it. Her husband Tom stood, barefoot in my kitchen, sipping from one of the green Walmart mugs I'd bought last summer. 2 kids scampered across my hardwood floors in socks, giggling. My hands shook with a mix of rage and confusion as I gripped the doorknob and shoved the door open. It crashed against the wall, and Karen's head snapped toward me, eyes wide. Which city in the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any run-ins with your HOA. We'd love to narrate your story on our channel. Her eyes went wide like a deer in headlights. "Oh my God!" she gasped, standing up fast. "What are you doing here? What am I doing here?" I shouted. "This is my house. What are you doing here?" She turned pale, then scrambled for her phone. "You're trespassing!" she shrieked. "I'm calling 911. And she did. She actually called the police on me, the owner of my own ranch. Now, hold up. How did we get to the point where Karen was calling the police on me, the rightful owner of a 40-acre ranch I inherited from my father? Let's go back. Hi, I'm Jacob Walker, 45 years old, widower, former Army medic. My wife passed 6 years ago, and I've lived quietly since then. Just me, my dogs, and my land. The ranch, Stone Pine Ridge, is in Colorado, about an hour out from town. It's not fancy, but it's mine. My father left it to me, and I've kept it running ever since. I don't belong to any HOA. In fact, this area never had one until the McKinley. Estates folks moved into the land across the creek and formed their own HOA. They're the gated kind with speed bumps and rules about mailbox colors. I am the dirt road type with chickens and a barn full of memories. We were friendly at first until Karen showed up. Karen Simons, HOA president, short blonde hair, always with sunglasses on her head like a crown, lived across the creek, but she never respected boundaries. She started with little things. Notes about my unkempt grass. Complaints about the unsightly barn tools I left on the porch. She'd walk her dog through my land like it was public parkland. Then came the letters. Harassment, really. I always tossed them. I wasn't part of her HOA. She had no legal power here. Or so I thought. 2 weeks ago, I left for Arizona to help my cousin after his surgery. I boarded up the windows, turned off the water, left my security cameras rolling. That's when Karen struck, but I didn't know that yet. On the way back from Arizona, something kept itching at me. I couldn't explain it. Call it a gut feeling. I left earlier than planned and drove through the night. No calls, no texts. I just needed to see the ranch. And now here I was, face to face with Karen, calling 911, claiming I was trespassing. Let's rewind just a little further before everything exploded. 2 weeks before all this, I noticed something odd. My mailbox was ripped open one morning, and inside was a paper that didn't look like regular mail. It was a notice from McKinley, HOA enforcement demanding I comply with their community standards and vacate the property for rezoning. I laughed at first. It had to be a mistake. My land was older than that entire HOA. My property line was clearly marked. I tossed the letter in the burn barrel and thought nothing of it. Next day, Karen came over in person. "I'm just here as a courtesy," she said with a forced smile. The HOA will be making some updates to the land around here. It's best you leave early. You'll get an offer soon." I stared at her. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious," she said, adjusting her sunglasses. "You don't own my land." "Well, the HOA believes there's a legal pathway," she said sweetly. "We'd hate for this to become difficult." It sounded like a threat. I told her to leave. She did, but not before taking pictures of my front yard like she was collecting evidence. A few days later, I left for Arizona. I installed a new deadbolt, set up camera motion alerts, and told my friend Daryl down the road to check in once a week. Turns out Daryl got called away to Montana after a family emergency, and that's the gap Karen took full advantage of. So when I stepped into my ranch that day and saw her family inside, I was more confused than furious. Who does that? Apparently Karen. But let's go back to that front porch. Karen was still on the phone with 911 pacing back and forth. Yes, there's a dangerous man here claiming he owns the place. He's screaming at my children. I wasn't. I hadn't even raised my voice since the first minute. Her husband, Tom, now stood in front of the kids like I was going to lunge at them. I kept my cool. "You broke into my home," I said firmly. "This is my land. My name is on the deed. You are trespassing. You are stealing." Karen spun around, eyes blazing. "You were gone. The HOA considered the land abandoned and transferred management to us." I almost laughed. "You can't just decide that. The community board passed a motion. It's not your land," I snapped. "Officers are on their way," she hissed. "You'll be removed." Then she turned around and told her husband, "Pack up the photos and jewelry. Take them to the truck just in case." Jewelry? Photos? Had she moved in completely? My stomach twisted as I realized she hadn't just been staying here. She'd settled in. Everything looked rearranged. My recliner was gone. A pink couch stood in its place. My father's picture was no longer on the mantel. There were family photos of Karen's kids smiling in front of my barn. They had replaced me in my own house. The sound of sirens in the distance made Karen smile. "Looks like help is coming," she said smugly. I stepped outside, not because I was scared, but because I wanted the officers to see me calm, collected, reasonable, but I had no idea what Karen had told them on the phone and whether they'd even believe me, and just as I took one more step down the porch, the patrol car rolled into the driveway. 2 cops stepped out with hands on their belts. One of them shouted, "Sir, step away from the property." And that's when I realized they might believe her. "Sir, step away from the property," the taller officer shouted again, hand hovering dangerously close to his holster. I raised both hands slowly and took a careful step back from the porch, trying not to let the heat of the moment take over my voice. "This is my house," I said calmly. "My name is Jacob Walker. I live here. They're the ones who broke in." Karen came bounding down the steps like a stage actress in a courtroom drama, tears already welling up in her eyes. "Officers, thank God you're here," she cried, grabbing the shorter cop's arm. "This man forced his way onto our property. He scared my children. My children!" I blinked hard. "Her property." "Ma'am," the shorter officer said gently, "we're going to sort this out. Please take your children inside. We'll speak to the gentleman here." Karen looked over her shoulder at me, lips curled in a smirk, before she turned around and marched back up the steps like she owned the whole place. "I have ID," I said, patting my jacket pocket. "And the deed to this house is in my name. You can check the county records." The taller cop gave me a long look, then nodded. "Go ahead and show me your ID." I handed it over. "You might also want to check with the county recorder's office. This land has been in my family since 1986. He walked off with my ID while the other officer stayed, watching me like I might leap at the windows or something. "Just so we're clear," I said, keeping my voice level. "Karen Simons doesn't live here. She's from McKinley Estates across the creek. This land isn't part of their HOA, never has been. She says otherwise," the officer replied. Well, she's lying. It took 10 more minutes of tense silence before the officer returned from his cruiser, a different expression on his face this time. He handed me back my ID. "Mr. Walker, we checked the records." "And you're right. You're the owner of record." I exhaled slowly, but before I could relax, the officer added, "That doesn't explain how they got inside with keys." My eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, keys? They didn't break in. No signs of forced entry. The locks match their keys." My mind spun. How did Karen get keys unless... No way! I ran to the garage. The side lock had been changed. My spare lock box was gone. I bolted around the back and checked the cellar door. Also changed. She had replaced my locks. "Unbelievable," I muttered. By the time I made it back to the offices, Karen was standing by the doorway again, holding a folder. She handed it to the shorter cop. "These are our temporary occupancy papers from the McKinley HOA board," she said, proudly. "We filed them last week under emergency relocation guidelines. There is no legal standing." I said HOA paperwork doesn't override property deeds. Not here, not anywhere in Colorado. The officers flipped through the papers. "We'll need to get county legal involved," one muttered. "This looks unofficial." "It is unofficial," I said. She squatted in my home while I was out of town, changed my locks, replaced my things. Karen turned defensive. "You were gone for over a week. No lights, no activity. The property looked abandoned. The HOA had the right to intervene." "You're not a government agency," I snapped. "You can't just claim property. People abandon homes all the time. I didn't abandon anything." The officers stepped between us. "All right, let's all calm down." The taller one said, "Mr. Walker, do you have proof of recent residents' utility bills?" Camera footage. I pulled out my phone. I turned off the Wi-Fi when I left, but the motion alerts before that would be time-stamped. I opened the app and began scrolling. Then I stopped. The camera feed was blank, deleted. All logs were wiped. My hands shook as I held the phone. Karen had disabled or destroyed the system. That's when I knew this wasn't just an accident or some misunderstanding. This was premeditated. She wanted this land. She planned it. I faced the officers again. "I don't have camera footage anymore," I said slowly. "But I can get Daryl on the phone. He checks in on the place. He'll back me up." "You can go ahead and call him," the officer said. I dialed voicemail. Daryl was still out of state. My backup was gone. And Karen, she looked like she'd won. Tom came outside with the kids, boxes in hand. "Let's just get what we can," he mumbled. To her. "No," she snapped. "We stay until we're removed. That's the rule." "Rule? What rule?" The officers exchanged glances. "We're not the judge and jury here," the taller one said. "But given what we've seen, Mr. Walker, we recommend filing for emergency removal through the court." "You can't force them out today." "What do you mean?" I barked. "You're telling me I can't walk into my own house? It's a civil matter now. If we remove them and a judge says otherwise, it could come back on us. You need an order." "Unbelievable." Karen grinned. It was like watching a thief get away in daylight. I was locked out of my own house. They'd squatted, lied, changed locks, and now the police were treating this like a dispute. "Don't worry," Karen called from the doorway. "You'll get your day in court." Her daughter, maybe 7 or 8 years old, peeked from behind the door and waved at me. "Hi, Mr. Walker. Mommy says this is our new vacation home." My heart clenched. I turned back to my truck, hands shaking, vision blurred. They were playing house in my life, in my memories, in the home where I buried my wife's ashes beneath the oak tree. I couldn't stay another second. I needed a plan. The next morning, I drove straight to the county courthouse with every document I had, deed, utility bills, photos, maintenance records. I filed for an emergency restraining order and began eviction proceedings immediately, but legal things take time. And Karen, she used every second of delay to her advantage. By the third day, she had posted a fake HOA notice on my ranch gate saying the land was under protective occupancy status. She even hosted a barbecue that weekend. Dozens of people, HOA folks, were walking around my fields with plastic cups and lawn chairs like they owned the place, like I was the outsider. But the most shocking part was what I found later that night. Something buried in my storage shed, tucked behind the tools, a printed contract, a forged signature, and my name on a sale agreement to Karen Simons. She had created fake paperwork claiming I sold her the ranch. I stood there, frozen in my own storage shed, holding a crumpled piece of paper with my forged signature on it. It was a purchase agreement typed up and printed on cheap paper, stating that I, Jacob Walker, had sold my entire 40-acre ranch to Karen Simons for $20,000. $20,000 for land that was worth over $750,000. And there it was, my signature at the bottom. Except I never signed it. My stomach flipped. My ears rang. She had taken it this far, a fake contract, a forged document. I whipped out my phone and took photos from every angle. I didn't touch it again. I carefully slid the paper back exactly where it was and back, out of the shed, locking it behind me. Karen was building a false paper trail, and if I hadn't come back early from Arizona, she might have had time to file this thing somewhere, maybe even try to record it at the county office. I felt sick, but I wasn't going to panic. I was going to fight back. The next morning, I drove straight to my lawyer, Linda McKenzie. Old school, tough as nails and smarter than any 10 people I know. I'd hired her once for a boundary dispute 5 years ago and kept her number since. She looked over the photos and that same fake sale contract. Her face darkened. She's not just squatting, Linda said. She's trying to rewrite history. Can she get away with this? She can try, but she'll regret it. This isn't just civil now. This is criminal fraud, forgery, even attempted identity theft. I nodded, gripping the arms of the chair. Good, because I want her out. We'll get her out, she said, already typing. And she's going to wish she never laid eyes on your property. By that afternoon, Linda had filed a motion for emergency injunctive relief. She also filed a complaint with the sheriff's department for forgery and breaking and entering. She advised me to stay off the property for now, let the legal process play out, but that didn't mean I was going to sit still. That night, I parked across the dirt road and watched the house from a distance. Lights were on in every room. Laughter echoed from the porch. Karen and her family were having a bonfire in my backyard. I saw my late wife's wooden rocking chair beside the flames. Karen was sitting in it. That chair had sat untouched for 6 years. Something snapped in me. I started the truck, wheels spinning in the dirt, but I forced myself to drive away. This had to be done right. The next day, things got worse. I stopped by the feed store in town to get some supplies and ran into Dave, the owner. "Hey, Jake," he said slowly. "Heard you sold the ranch." I froze. "What?" "Yeah. Karen Simons was in here yesterday, bought 4 bags of chicken feed, told me she and her husband finally closed on the place. Said you signed it over?" I stared at him. "She's lying." "Dave." His eyebrows shot up. "She said she had the deed. She forged it." I've already filed charges. Dave scratched his head. Man, she's got nerve. You need anything, you let me know. You want me to call the sheriff? I've already got my lawyer on it. Word was spreading. Karen was poisoning the whole town with her lies, but not everyone believed her. My neighbor from down the ridge, Miss Ellie, showed up at the courthouse later that day holding a thumb drive. I don't trust that woman, she said. So I took some footage. What kind of footage? I asked. Security camera on my front gate caught her driving your tractor. She was moving things off your land into her property, trailer by trailer. Ellie handed me the drive. Just thought you should have it. Bless her. Linda lit up when I gave her the footage. This is huge, she said. Shows she's transferring property illegally. More evidence for the judge. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't slowing down. She called Channel 7 News. I watched in horror as a local reporter aired a segment titled Neighborhood Hero Rescues Abandoned Ranch, Faces Legal Dispute with Mysterious Owner. They showed shots of Karen hugging her kids in front of my barn. She was spinning the story like I had deserted the ranch, and she was the Good Samaritan trying to give it life again. The worst part? The segment ended with her smiling and saying, "We just want what's best for the community. This place has so much potential." I threw the remote at the floor. By the end of that week, the judge granted a court hearing and issued a preliminary order. Karen was not allowed to sell, rent, or alter the property in any way. The sheriff's office now had an official report on file, but the eviction, that would take a few more days. Karen must have sensed something was up, because 2 nights later, she vanished. I drove by the ranch that morning and found the house completely empty. All the lights were off, no cars, no signs of kids or toys or shoes. I stepped out of my truck cautiously. I called Linda. She's gone. Linda paused, completely. Yep, be careful. Don't go inside yet. But I did. I had to see the damage. I opened the front door and immediately gagged. Garbage everywhere. Moldy dishes, food left on the counters, broken picture frames. She had stripped the house bare of my things. My tool shed was empty. My grandfather's shotgun was gone. My camera system had been smashed and dumped in the toilet. They took everything they could carry. I walked into my bedroom. That's when I saw the writing on the mirror. Lipstick in big red letters. You shouldn't have come back. I backed out of the room. This wasn't just about property anymore. Karen had declared war. I walked into my living room to call the sheriff when I heard tires on gravel. A car was coming up the road. I peeked out the curtain, and my blood froze. It was Karen's SUV, and behind it, 2 more cars. She hadn't left. She had gone to get reinforcements. The doors swung open and people started stepping out. Karen, her husband, a guy in a suit, and 2 men wearing black jackets with HOA, compliance officer printed on the back. I watched as Karen pulled something from her folder, a brand new set of papers, and marched toward my door. I didn't wait this time. I opened the door and stepped out before she could knock. Karen smirked and waved the papers in my face. "Jacob, I'm placing you under community compliance violation," she said. "We've reissued ownership under emergency HOA redevelopment codes. You're trespassing now." I stared at her. "You better call 911 again." "Oh, I plan to," she said. "Because this time, you're not walking away." Karen's words hit like a slap. "Because this time you're not walking away." She pulled out her phone and dialed 911 with a look of pure satisfaction. Behind her, the so-called HOA compliance officers stood, with their arms crossed, wearing smug expressions like they were waiting for me to start begging. I didn't flinch. I took out my own phone and pressed record. "Say that again," I said, pointing the camera at her. "You're calling 911 to report." the owner of this ranch, for trespassing. Karen blinked, then turned away. I don't need to explain anything to you. The HOA has authority now. The guy in the suit, some shady lawyer she must have paid, stepped forward. I'm advising my client not to say another word. Sir, you're on land. It's currently under civil dispute. You've been warned. That's funny, I replied, keeping my voice cool. Because I just got off the phone with my attorney too, and she's already filed criminal charges for fraud and forgery. That makes you and your client part of a criminal case. That caught him off guard. Karen's eyes darted to him. He's bluffing. I held up my phone. You want to test that theory? The sheriff's department will be here in less than 20 minutes. You might want to get your kids out of this mess while you can. Her jaw clenched. Her face turned a deep red, but she didn't back down. I don't care what kind of act you're putting on, she hissed. This house is ours now. You were gone. You abandoned it. You don't belong here anymore. I stepped forward just enough for my voice to drop into a steady growl. This land belonged to my father. I've lived here for over 20 years. I buried my wife under that oak tree out back. If you think I'm walking away because you and your fake HOA army faked some papers and had a barbecue on my lawn, you've got another thing coming. That's when the sirens came again. A sheriff's truck and 2 deputies rolled up the dirt path, lights flashing. Karen's posture instantly stiffened. The lead deputy stepped out, looked around at the scene, the SUVs, the HOA jackets, the tension thick in the air, and walked over to me first. Mr. Walker. Yes, sir. We reviewed the documents your attorney filed. Your ownership has been verified. He looked over at Karen. Ma'am, you and your party need to leave the premises immediately. Karen's mouth dropped. You can't be serious. I called you. He is the one trespassing. The deputy didn't flinch. This property belongs to Mr. Walker. Your presence here is unauthorized. You are now in violation of a court order issued 2 days ago. I haven't seen any order, she barked. That's because you've been hiding. We attempted delivery twice. You weren't home. Karen's face twisted. I have rights. Not here, you don't. The officers began asking the others for their names and IDs. The HOA compliance officers turned out to be 2 local buddies, Karen paid to wear jackets and act official. One of them, visibly shaken, muttered, I thought this was legit. I watched. It all silently. I wanted to scream. I wanted to yell. I wanted to shout justice from the top of the barn. But I didn't. I just watched Karen's little empire crumble. The deputies told Karen she would need to report to the station for questioning regarding the forged documents. Her lawyer tried to talk big, but his tone got quieter with each minute. Karen's kids sat in the back of her SUV now, staring at me through the window. I didn't feel joy. I felt tired. When they finally left Sheriff Carr behind them, I stood in the middle of my porch and let the silence settle. But it didn't last long. Not even 3 hours passed before I got a text from Linda. Sheriff just called. Karen's lawyer is claiming she bought the property from a man impersonating you. Now she's blaming him for the forged paperwork. Be careful. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked out back. I needed air. I passed the old oak tree, my wife's resting place. The wind blew softly through the branches. That's when I noticed something. A fresh patch of dirt, disturbed right by the small memorial marker I'd placed for her. My chest tightened. I walked closer and saw a corner of plastic sticking out of the dirt. I knelt, heart pounding, and pulled it up. It was a storage bag. Inside letters, dozens of them, all written in my handwriting, but they weren't mine. Someone had forged pages of letters from me to Karen. Each one claiming I loved her, missed her, wanted her to move in, even offering her the house as a gift. They were love letters, fake ones, planted by the grave of my wife. I fell backward, in the dirt, speechless. Karen hadn't just forged a signature. She was trying to rewrite history to make it look like I invited her here. That my dead wife approved of her. This wasn't just criminal, this was deranged. I drove straight back to town with the letters in hand, heart pounding with fury. Karen wasn't just a liar, she was dangerous. I sat across from Sheriff Donnelly in his office, a Ziploc bag of fake love letters between us. He looked through them, jaw clenched tighter with each turn of the page. "This woman isn't just squatting," he muttered. "She's building a full-blown fantasy." "These letters were buried at my wife's memorial," I said, my voice barely steady. "She wasn't just trying to steal my home, she tried to replace my entire life." The sheriff closed the folder slowly. "This changes things. We're adding emotional distress, evidence tampering, and identity fabrication to the complaint. I'll have deputies secure your ranch tonight, just in case she tries something again." I nodded, but felt no relief. I wasn't just dealing with a Karen. I was dealing with a narcissistic manipulator who saw no limits. Linda called me while I was still at the station. "I've been digging into Karen's background. She said she's done this before." My breath caught. "What?" "Back in Utah, different town, there's a sealed court case, but from what I could gather, she tried to claim property rights over a disabled man's mobile home after acting as his caretaker. Claimed he gifted it to her, but the judge threw it out. And no charges, not enough evidence at the time, but the pattern matches." My fingers gripped the phone tighter. "She's been doing this for years, and you're the biggest prize she's ever gone after," Linda added. Later that night, I returned home to find deputies parked near the gate. They gave me a nod and waved me through. The house was dark, cold, and silent. I turned on one light at a time, careful, still half expecting someone to jump out from the shadows. I didn't sleep. I stayed on the couch, shotgun across my lap, listening to every creak and whistle outside. Around 2:30 a.m., I saw headlights on the far road. I stepped outside and peered through my binoculars. It wasn't Karen's SUV. It was a moving truck. They parked across the road for nearly 15 minutes, engine idling. Then it turned off. No one came out. Deputies were still stationed down the ridge. I called them and reported the vehicle. They arrived quietly, but by the time they reached the spot, the truck was gone like ghosts. That morning, I found fresh tire tracks near my back fence. Whoever it was, they had come closer than I thought. 2 days later, I was summoned to the courthouse for the official hearing. Karen was there, this time without her HOA compliance gang. Just her and a new, very uncomfortable-looking public defender. She looked different now, less polished. Her hair was frizzy, her outfit wrinkled. The confident smirk was gone. Linda laid out every piece of evidence, the forged sale document, the fabricated letters, photos of my destroyed cameras, Ellie's footage of Karen driving my tractor, screenshots of Karen's texts to a neighbor claiming the house was hers, copies of HOA notices that had no legal bearing. Karen tried to argue that she was misled by a man who pretended to be Jacob Walker and tricked her into thinking she owned the property. She pointed to the letters and said, "I truly believed he loved me." The courtroom fell into an uneasy silence. Even the judge's face twisted in disbelief. "I've never met this woman outside of HOA meetings," I said, clearly. "She made all of this up, every single page." The judge ruled in my favor before Karen even finished her last sentence. She was evicted immediately. Criminal charges were officially in process. A restraining order was granted on the spot. But the nightmare didn't end there. When I returned home that evening, I noticed the back door was ajar. I approached slowly, shotgun ready. Inside, someone had broken in again. This time, they didn't steal. They destroyed. Furniture was slashed. The walls spray-painted with red phrases like, "You lied and we were family." My wife's wedding dress, kept in a sealed bag in the closet, had been pulled out, shredded, and pinned to the wall with "A knife through the chest." I dropped to my knees. This was hate. This was obsession. The sheriff arrived within 20 minutes and took more photos. Karen had an alibi. She had signed in at a local women's shelter that evening, but they weren't sure how long she had been there. Before checking in, Donnelly put out a search on any associates who might have helped her. Then I remembered something. The moving truck. "I think someone else is working with her," I said. "There's no way she did all this alone." The next day, I reviewed Ellie's camera footage again, frame by frame. That's when I saw it. During the fake HOA barbecue, a man I hadn't recognized before. Bearded, sunglasses, carrying Karen's daughter, and laughing like family. He never spoke during the confrontation, but now I remembered. He never gave his name to the sheriff, and he was the only one Karen never told to leave when things got bad. I sent the frame to Linda and the sheriff. They ran facial recognition. 2 days later, I got the call. The man was her brother, Dean Simons, former real estate broker. Disbarred 5 years ago for forgery and fraud. He had been helping her all along. That night, I walked the property again with a flashlight. Just me and my boots in the mud. Out behind the barn near the treine, I noticed something. A small clearing that hadn't been there before. Freshly disturbed soil, a wooden crate. I pried it open. Inside were my belongings, stolen tools, my original Wi-Fi router, my wife's keepsake locket, some of my dad's old metals, and a burner phone. The sheriff's team took it into evidence. What they found inside: voice recordings, dozens of them. Karen's voice, Dean's voice, recordings of them planning how to move in, what to say to the news, and how to make the old man look crazy if he comes back. I sat on the porch that night staring out at the dark horizon. They wanted to erase me, but I had the truth, and now I had proof. The next morning, I walked into Sheriff Donnie's office with a quiet kind of fury burning in my chest. He was already reviewing the burner phone recordings when I arrived. "I don't even know where to start," he said, sliding a file across the desk toward me. "We've got enough here to charge both Karen and her brother Dean with conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, burglary, property theft, and more. Probably a dozen counts." I opened the file, typed transcripts of the recordings, filled each page. Dean's voice: "Just make it look like he invited you." Guys like that, lonely widowers, they can't prove otherwise. Karen will throw a community event. If the neighbors believe I'm the owner, the police will back off. All we need is time to flip the narrative. "Dean, if he shows up early, you call 911. Make him the threat. They'll never question a crying mum." I gritted my teeth. "I want her arrested." "She will be," Donnelly said. "We've issued a warrant for both Karen and Dean. Their last known location was that women's shelter and an Airbnb Dean had been renting under a fake name. They're on the run now." "Unbelievable," I muttered. "They didn't just want my house. They wanted to destroy everything tied to it." Sheriff Donnelly looked at me, something like sympathy in his eyes. That woman didn't just cross the line, she built a whole new one. By that evening, news broke. The local paper printed an exposé titled HOA. President and brother wanted an elaborate ranch scam. Sheriff, we have the evidence. It spread fast. Karen's face was everywhere. Even Channel 7, the same news outlet that once praised her for saving the ranch, ran a correction and followed up with a headline that finally told the truth. Local man targeted in forgery scheme. HOA involvement now under investigation. I couldn't stop the comments, though. There were still people who believed her, who said maybe I had signed it over and regretted it. But most finally saw what I'd been saying all along. I spent the next week repairing what I could. I replaced the locks again, cleaned every wall, burned the spray-painted curtains, even restored the barn where Dean had apparently been squatting. But something still didn't feel right. It was like they left a shadow behind. Miss Ellie stopped by one morning with a basket of muffins and a hug.
"I knew something was off about that woman," she said. "Always had that I'm better than you look in her eyes." "Yeah, well," I sighed. She almost pulled it off. Ellie looked me dead in the eye, but she didn't. That night, Linda called. They caught Dean. My heart thumped. Where? A highway checkpoint outside Nevada. Fake license plate. They matched his face to the footage you gave us. And Karen, she wasn't with him, but he talked a lot.
I held my breath. Karen's been trying to flee the country. She booked a flight out of Denver under another fake name. DEA flagged the ID. There's now a federal warrant. I leaned back in my chair, hand to my forehead. She's really going down for... This isn't she. Linda's voice was calm but firm. Yes, and I'm going to make sure the court hears everything. Every letter, every audio recording, every lie. She paused, then added softly. You did everything right, Jacob. You stayed calm. You gathered evidence. You trusted the process. I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt tired. That night I finally went back to sleep in my own bed for the first time in weeks. The wind rattled the old windows gently. Crickets hummed outside. Somewhere out past the fence, coyotes howled like they always had. It was almost peaceful again until the phone rang. It was past 11 p.m. I checked the caller ID, unknown number. I answered. There was silence for a moment, and then her voice.
You think you've won, Jacob, but you don't know me. I froze. Karen, you took everything from me, she hissed. This wasn't about the ranch. It was about respect, and I will get it. Then the line went dead. I called Sheriff Donnelly immediately. He traced the number. It was a burner phone from a gas station.
Outside Fort Collins, she was still close, still watching. The sheriff promised to increase patrols near the ranch. He said the feds were now actively tracking all surveillance footage from nearby exits and state roads. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, a deputy knocked on my door. They'd caught her at a Greyhound bus terminal just before noon. She was wearing a wig and glasses, holding a fake passport, and trying to board a bus to El Paso. And in her bag, more fake documents, a map of my ranch with notes scribbled in red ink. One read, "Take back what's mine." I sat down when I heard that Karen Simons was officially arrested, denied bail, and placed under federal custody for fraud, forgery, and interstate flight from prosecution. Dean Simons took a plea deal and agreed to testify against her. I watched the court proceedings a month later from the front row, flanked by Linda on one side and Miss Ellie on the other. Karen stood in shackles, and for once she said nothing. No speech, no tears, no fake community talk, just silence. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in state prison. I walked out of that courtroom with a strange feeling, not joy, not revenge, just peace. I returned to the ranch and walked the perimeter. The air smelled like pine and rain. My wife's oak tree stood strong, untouched, since that awful night. I placed a fresh set of wildflowers beneath her stone. I told you I'd protect.
It, I whispered. I kept my promise. And from then on I did. I rebuilt, replanted.
Repainted. I also started working with a local non-profit helping veterans secure land ownership and understand property law so no one else would fall victim like I almost had. Because this story wasn't just about me. It was about standing your ground when everything's at stake. It was about how evil doesn't always show up with a gun. It shows up with a smile and paperwork. And it was about never giving up, no matter who tries to erase your name from your own life. Because in the end, the land knows the truth. And so, dewy 6 months passed, the snow melted, spring painted the hills again, and the ranch, my ranch, was alive. The porch had been rebuilt, stronger than before, the barn roof no longer leaked, the fences were straight, even the small chicken coop was filled again, this time with squawking hens that greeted me like old friends every morning. But what mattered most was the peace. The kind of peace that only comes after the storm. Karen Simons was behind bars. Her brother Dean was serving time in another state, already stripped of what little dignity he had left. And the fake HOA, well, it practically collapsed overnight. After Karen's arrest, the McKinley Estates board members scrambled to distance themselves. The HOA dissolved completely 3 months later when residents voted to disband it. Turns out most of them were tired of Karen's schemes, but too afraid to speak up. Now neighbors waved at me from across the creek. Some even came over to help rebuild. Miss Ellie brought by pies every Sunday like clockwork. Sheriff Donnelly and I became friends. He stopped by once a week just to chat over coffee and see how the land was doing. But even as life returned to normal, I never let my guard down completely. The damage Karen had done wasn't just physical. It left a scar, a deep one. I started therapy for the first time in my life. The counselor said I had situational trauma, that what happened wasn't just about losing a home, it was about having your identity questioned, erased, and rewritten. She was right. There were nights I still jolted awake thinking I'd see Karen on the porch again, phone in hand, calling 911 like I was the criminal. But then I'd step outside, breathe in the clean air, hear the birds, and remember, I won. One quiet afternoon, I walked down to the old oak tree again. The breeze moved through the leaves like whispers. I knelt and cleaned the plaque beside my wife's grave. I spoke to her like I always did. I kept it safe, Hannah. They tried, but they couldn't take it. You would have laughed at the way she called. The cops on me. You'd be proud, though, I never gave up. Just as I stood up, I heard a truck approaching. It wasn't a sheriff's cruiser. I turned, cautious, but relaxed when I saw it was Linda's car pulling up the driveway. She stepped out with her leather satchel and sunglasses, smiling. Thought I'd come in person to deliver the final envelope, she said, waving a manila folder. Final? She nodded, handing it to me. The judge closed the case yesterday. All property rights affirmed, all criminal charges complete, and the civil suit. She trailed off. I opened the folder. Inside was a check, a big one, over $280,000. Karen's assets, Linda said, liquidated by court order and awarded as damages.
It's not everything she cost you, but it's justice. I swallowed hard. I didn't expect this. You deserve it. She looked around the ranch with a smile. You rebuilt it, Jacob. And now you can protect it with more than just memories. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring into the horizon. The land was quiet. The sun dipped behind the hills, casting long golden shadows over the grass. That's when I noticed something tucked beneath the doormat. I bent down and picked it up. It was a small envelope. No name, no address, just one word, handwritten in black letters. Sorry. I opened it slowly. Inside was a folded piece of paper. No signature,
Just a short message. I lied. I hurt people. But I really believed you were the home I needed. I was wrong. I hope you find peace. I stared at the note for a long time. It was Karen's handwriting. Whether it was sincere or part of one last twisted play, I couldn't be sure. But I didn't burn it. I placed it in a box with the court records and recordings as a reminder that evil wears many faces, that boundaries matter, that peace is worth fighting for, and that no one calls 911 to steal your life, and walks away untouched. I locked my front door that night with a deep breath, dogs curled at my feet, the fireplace crackling in the background, my ranch, my life, my legacy still standing, still mine forever.